The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting a hazy orange glow over the edge of Pine Hollow, a quiet, pectedness. Wooded stretch of small-town America that felt cut off from the noise of the world, which was exactly how Cole Maddox liked it. The former combat medic had built a life here after tragedy forced him from the military. A simple life with his 9-year-old son Jamie, pectedness. A fixer-upper home on a patch of land surrounded by trees, and enough space between neighbors to keep the ghosts of war at bay, pectedness. The wind whispered through the pines that evening as Cole stirred a pot of chili on the stove and Jamie sketched dinosaurs at the kitchen table, pectedness, his tongue poking from the corner of his mouth in deep concentration. It was peaceful, familiar, until a knock came at the front door, 3 short raps, then a pause, then 3 more. Cole's instincts, long buried under layers of civilian life, flared awake. He wiped his hands on a towel, stepped quietly to the door and opened it halfway, prepared for anything, or so he thought. Standing on his porch were 6 young adults, their faces streaked with sweat and grime, their uniforms worn, torn, and mismatched. Some had boots barely laced, pectedness. Others clutched their sides like they'd been running for miles. They looked like soldiers, but something about them wasn't right. Their name patches were faded, ranks unclear, insignias missing or outdated. One of them, a lean, buzz-cut young man with a long scratch down his cheek, stepped forward and said, voice ragged and barely above a whisper, "Sir, may we?" Cole didn't answer. For the first time in years, his body locked into that old muscle memory. He scanned the formation automatically. Wounds, dehydration, fatigue, and, above all, fear, raw and unfiltered. "May you what?" he asked, voice low and wary. The soldier swallowed. "May we come in? We need help, please." Behind him, a young woman with a busted lip leaned against another, limping heavily. A dark stain spread across the side of her pants, likely blood. Another soldier, shorter, wary, looked back toward the woods, eyes scanning like a hunted animal. Cole stepped outside, quietly closing the door behind him. "What unit?" he asked. The group hesitated. One of them said, "17th Forward Recon," but another quickly added, "Joint Task 98. 2 different units." Cole's eyes narrowed. "Those units don't run together." The one who spoke first blinked. "Sir, we can explain." Inside, quietly, Cole muttered, opening the door again, "Jamie, upstairs." Now, Jamie's head popped up confused, but at his father's rare sharp tone, he obeyed without question, gathering his sketchbook and hurrying up the stairs. The 6 soldiers filed in, removing their boots by instinct, not out of courtesy. Cole cleared space in the living room, grabbing towels, a med kit, and 2 jugs of water. "Names," he said, tossing them water bottles. "Real ones." The one who first spoke identified himself as Alvarez. Then came Reyes, the injured female. Parker, the quiet one with shaking hands. Next was Jaff, built like a linebacker, but nursing a broken finger. Then Quan, the short scout who kept watching the windows, and finally Rivera, the last to speak, who looked barely 19 but whose eyes had seen too much. Their answers were quick, reflexive, but not without pauses, slips, inconsistencies. Cole patched Reyes first. Her leg wound was deep but clean, likely a field injury, not a firefight. As he stitched pectedness, he asked no more questions. He knew the truth was buried beneath layers of trauma and mistrust, and that getting it would take time, pectedness. When dinner was reheated, they devoured it in silence, eyeing the windows as if expecting someone to burst in. When Jamie snuck halfway down the stairs and asked, "Dad, who are they?" Cole just said, "Friends who need a place to rest." Jamie looked at the strangers with curiosity, and perhaps a bit of awe. After all, to a boy his age, soldiers were heroes from comic books and flags. That night, as the house creaked and cooled, Cole sat on the edge of the porch with a mug of black coffee, staring at the moon. Alvarez joined him quietly. "We're not supposed to be here," he said after a long silence, "but we didn't know where else to go." Cole didn't look at him. "There are protocols, a hospital, a base." Alvarez laughed bitterly. "You don't report in when you were never supposed to come back." That line hit like a slow grenade. Cole turned. "What are you saying?" Alvarez shook his head. "I can't. Not yet." Just thank you for not turning us away." The next morning, while the others slept in a makeshift bunk of blankets and couch cushions, Cole stepped into the woods behind his house and made a satellite call to an old friend, Ben Rourke, now a logistics tech at a base 2 states away. "You ever hear of a Unit 17 forward recon running joint with Task 98? Cole asked casually. Ben paused. "Nope." And Task 98 was decommissioned 2 years ago, after the chemical testing scandal. Cole's grip on the phone tightened. "Any chance some soldiers got left behind?" Ben hesitated. "Not officially, but there were rumors. Some names that got scrubbed fast. I've 6 of them showed up at my door." "Would that make sense to you?" "It would scare the hell out of me." That night Cole began piecing it together. These weren't just lost soldiers. They were survivors of something unspoken erased. Perhaps a Black Ops program or a test unit sent into conditions never meant to be reported. And now, they were being hunted. Because no government wants walking proof of something it denied. It explained their fear, their silence, the glances over shoulders, and the inconsistencies in their stories. Not lies, but trauma memory fragments colliding. That same night, 2 dark SUVs drove past the house slowly. No plates, no lights. Cole saw them through the living room window and turned off the lamps. Quan, from the couch, was already clutching his pack. Reyes's breath quickened. "They found us," she whispered. Cole locked the doors, bolted the windows, and pulled Jamie close. For the first time in years, he went into the basement and opened a locked cabinet that hadn't been touched since his discharge. Inside were old field rations, his M9 Beretta, 2 flares, a hunting rifle, and a waterproof case of military-grade documents and clearance badges. "If you're going to stay here," he told them, "then you need to tell me everything. Because I've put my son at risk now. And I don't do that lightly." The 6 looked at one another, the silence so tense it could snap. Reyes nodded, her voice barely audible. "They tried to erase us. We weren't supposed to come back alive." And with that, the real story began. Cole Maddox didn't sleep that night. Not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't. As the moonlight sliced across the living room through the slats of the window blinds, he sat upright in an old armchair with his hunting rifle cradled across his lap, his eyes flicking between the 6 young soldiers sprawled around the floor in sleeping bags and borrowed blankets. Even asleep, they twitched with the memories of what they'd survived. Restless legs, sudden jerks, mumbled names and gasps, combat dreams. Trauma had a rhythm, and Cole knew its beat by heart. Upstairs, Jamie slept soundly, unaware that his father's quiet home had become the last refuge for a group of soldiers who were now fugitives from the very institution meant to protect them. The house creaked under the weight of truth, a truth still partially hidden but threatening to explode. By dawn, the smell of brewed coffee and eggs sizzling in butter stirred the group awake. Cole cooked enough to feed a unit, because old habits die hard, and when they sat down at the table, a strange calm settled between them. The kind of calm that comes when the first layer of fear wears off, replaced by tired honesty. They ate in silence until Reyes, still pale from blood loss but steadier than last night, broke it with a question that sounded more like a plea. "Are we safe here?" Cole looked around the table. Every face turned toward him, eyes sunken but hopeful. He didn't lie. For now, but not forever. Not if someone's looking for you. Parker, the youngest of the group, flinched. "They are, We don't know how long they'll wait before coming in full force." Cole leaned back in his chair and finally asked, "Tell me what happened." Alvarez exchanged a look with the rest, then nodded. "We were part of an experimental humanitarian unit attached to an unofficial recon op overseas. We weren't told much, just that it was peacekeeping. Rural sector, supposed to be no contact. We were sent into a zone labeled neutral humanitarian ground. But it wasn't. It was hot. Conflict hot. But not from locals." Jaff picked up the story, knuckles whitening. 3 days in, we were exposed to something. Something airborne. We didn't know it at the time, but it wasn't just tear gas or chemicals. It was something else. "An agent. A weapon?" Cole asked. Quan nodded. We think so. We were told to keep quiet. Our comms were cut, no evac. Our CO, the only one who started asking questions. He got shot during extraction. Reyes looked down at her plate. We carried him out, and with him, the satchel you saw. That drive he protected, it has everything. Footage, data, files. Proof of the agent. Proof that they sent us in as test subjects. Rivera, who hadn't spoken until now, finally looked up. Pectedness. They wanted us to die out there so they wouldn't have to report it. But we didn't. So they're cleaning up the mess. Cole stood and walked slowly to his office. When he returned, he held the satchel. He placed it on the table and unzipped it. Inside, along with some encrypted drives, was a folded sheet of official orders and a sealed envelope with no return. He scanned the document. This is black letter, level authorization. There are no digital copies of this in the system, which means you're right. You were ghosted from the inside. The soldiers sat in silence. The weight of having their fears confirmed almost crushed them. Who else knows? Cole asked. Alvarez sighed. No one. We've been running for 9 days. We tried reaching command channels, but every signal was scrambled. We think the same unit that shot our CO is tracking us. Private contractors. No U.S. Black Response Unit. Unofficial but real. That chilled Cole. He'd only heard whispers of such units. Cleaners used for deep state deniability. Black bag teams with no identifiers. If that was true, then these kids were in more danger than even they realized. You're lucky you made it here, Cole muttered. If you'd gone to a hospital, you'd all be dead by now. Why did you help us? Reese asked. Cole paused. Because someone once did the same for me. When I didn't deserve it. He didn't elaborate, he didn't need to. That afternoon, Cole called Margaret Jennings, a former military lawyer turned civilian whistleblower advocate. She owed Cole a favor from years back during an incident in Kandahar that both nearly lost their lives. He told her what he had. She went silent on the line, then said, "If it's real, you'll have targets on your back by morning." "We already do." "All right," she said. "I'll get a secure line to a senator who doesn't answer to defense contractors. But Cole, keep them alive." Cole chuckled dryly. That's kind of the plan. Over the next few hours, the house transformed. The soldiers, once guests, became a temporary unit again. Cole reorganized them into watches, reissued field roles, and set up security perimeters around the property using his old training. Tripwires. Signal flares. Emergency exits. His barn became a fallback shelter, his basement a med bay. They trained, ate, and healed together. Jamie, initially kept upstairs, was soon allowed to eat dinner with the group, slowly learning their names. He bonded especially with Quan, Pectedness, who showed him how to tie real survival knots, and Parker, who secretly drew cartoon versions of each soldier when Jamie wasn't looking. By the second night, laughter, faint and cautious, broke through the walls of fear. But outside the house, things grew tense. Cole noticed a strange pattern in the woods: snapped branches, a moved trail camera, tire tracks from a tread he didn't recognize. Someone had come near. Watched them, maybe even listened. That night he set up a fake campfire decoy behind the property. At 3:12 am, a red infrared dot appeared on it, visible through his night vision scope. He knew then they weren't safe anymore. The next morning, the soldiers packed their gear. Alvarez said, "We should move. We're putting your boy at risk." But Cole shook his head. "Leaving splits you up. Makes you easy to pick off. We stay. We fight as one." He paused. "Besides, I've already risked everything. I'm not turning back now." Margaret called again that evening. Pectedness. Her voice trembled with urgency. "I got access to the drive through remote sync. You're sitting on enough evidence to trigger a congressional inquiry, Pectedness. They'll send someone soon to extract you, but you'll need to hold your ground for at least 48 hours. Can we trust them? This team?" "Yes." "But you'll be the bait until they arrive." "Understood." He hung up and turned to the group. "We've got 2 days. Then a chopper extracts us. Until then, we prepare." And prepare they did. Barricades. Defensive lines. Code signals. For a single father who wanted nothing but peace. Cole had once again stepped into a battlefield. But this time it was in his own backyard. At night, pectedness. He watched Jamie sleep and wondered what kind of world would hunt down its own soldiers and leave them to die, pectedness. But when he looked at the 6 broken souls piecing themselves back together under his roof, pectedness, he also remembered what it meant to stand up for something again. Not for medals, not for flags, but for truth, and for the ones the system tried to erase. And so, as the second night rolled in, and the wind shifted with the scent of danger, Cole Maddox stood in the dark, gripping his rifle, watching the tree line with calm determination. He wasn't just a father now. He was a guardian of the forgotten. And this was only the beginning. By the time the first shot rang out, Cole Maddox was already moving. It was just past 2:00 a.m. on the third night, pectedness, and the forest around the house had fallen into an eerie silence that no longer felt natural. The birds had stopped calling. The insects had quieted. Even the wind held its breath. Cole had sensed something building all day, movement in the trees too far for his eyes, but loud enough for his instincts, a pressure on his chest like something watching from just beyond the pines. And then, without warning, pectedness, a single suppressed round cracked through the trees and hit the edge of the barn's metal roof, sending a sharp ping echoing across the property. The sound didn't come from fear. It came from training. Cole dropped low, rolled across the porch, and barked into the small walkie at his hip. West tree line. Red alert. Within seconds the house exploded into organized chaos. Parker and Jaff, already in gear, pectedness, grabbed their designated positions on the second-floor windows. Ray's limped to the basement where she'd been prepping IFAKs and gear for a quick medevac. And Quan disappeared like a shadow toward the eastern side with a pair of motion traps. Jamie, rehearsed and ready from drills with his dad, climbed into the attic crawl space and locked himself in the padded, quiet zone they'd built together 2 days ago. The house was ready, pectedness. Cole hadn't lived through 2 tours in Fallujah and another in Syria just to let an unmarked kill squad ambush his home, pectedness. This wasn't just about defense. It was about holding a line that shouldn't need defending in the first place. Outside, the forest lit up faintly with the flicker of low-powered sensor flares, triggered by Quan's tripwires. Then came movement. Figures, 6 or more, in black tactical gear with no unit insignia, fanned out through the underbrush like wolves. Cole, pectedness, lying prone on the kitchen floor with his scoped rifle aimed through the slightly open front window, spotted one creeping toward the porch. He whispered, 1 o'clock, close range. Alvarez beside him with a sidearm nodded. Wait for your shot. A second figure stepped into the crosshair. A glimmer of steel catching the light, a suppressed submachine gun. Cole exhaled, squeezed, fired. The man went down without a sound. The others didn't stop. In fact, they moved faster now, triggered by the shot, their strategy shifting into full assault mode. Whoever these men were, they weren't here to capture anyone. They were here to silence them. For good. Parker shouted from above, "South side breach!" 2 incoming. Jaff opened fire through a side window, sending a crackling barrage that lit up the shadows. Ray's in the basement relayed over comms. EMPs charging. 30 seconds. Cole grinned. They weren't just fighting with bullets. They had brains, pectedness. He'd helped Quan rig a makeshift electromagnetic pulse device, using old microwave parts and car batteries, meant to scramble unprotected comms and optics. It wasn't pretty, but it was Warzone-level improvisation. EMP now. Ray's called. A small pop sounded beneath the house, and for a few heartbeats, every night vision goggle on the intruders' helmets went dead. Every comm unit hissed into static. The house turned dark. Cole used that moment to shift position, crawling to the stairwell and signaling Alvarez to cover him. Upstairs, Parker tossed a flashbang out the broken window, followed by a volley of suppressing fire. One of the black-clad attackers screamed. "They're pulling back," Jaff called. Cole didn't believe it. "No," he said into his walkie. "It's regrouping tactics. They're testing defenses." And they were. 10 minutes later, movement on thermal sensors indicated a full circle had formed around the property. No one spoke much, Just terse calls, whispered updates, heavy breathing. Cole checked on Jamie via the attic hatch. The boy gave a thumbs up with shaking hands. "You okay, champ?" "I'm okay," Jamie whispered. "I've got Mom's picture in the comic book." "I'm good." Cole nearly lost it right there. But he nodded and whispered, "Just stay quiet." "You're doing great." He turned away before the boy could see the tears in his eyes. "Back downstairs." Quan returned with a nasty gash on his shoulder, but a satisfied look. "Claymores are armed." Pectedness. "That'll buy us 30 seconds if they rush from the east. Let's hope we don't need them." Alvarez was staring out into the dark. "They're not random," he said quietly. "They're Special Forces." Natcha saw the way the lead moved. Controlled. Precision. "That means they know who they're up against," Cole replied. "Pectedness. And they know we've got the satchel." He pulled the small military-grade bag out from behind a false panel in the floor. "They'll never stop coming for this. We need to get it out." Reyes, pale and sweaty, said, "Margaret said extraction is coming." "How long?" "Sunrise." "We'll never last that long." Cole looked out toward the west, where the sky was just starting to turn a deeper blue. "Then we hold. Hour by hour." The next wave came just after 400 EM, a coordinated push from 3 sides. One of them breached the barn, Pectedness, setting off an explosion that rocked the back wall of the house. Another made it to the porch before Jaff tackled him with nothing but a kitchen knife and instinct. Blood sprayed. Cole was everywhere, shooting, shouting, patching wounds, refastening barricades. Quan went down with a fractured ankle. Parker dislocated her shoulder, Pectedness. Alvarez took a round in the thigh, but still dragged Rise out of the collapsing stairwell when a grenade rocked the foundation. It was chaos, but it was organized chaos. They were a team again, a family of survivors who refused to die in silence. Then the radio buzzed. "Eagle inbound. 5 minutes." Cole ran to the attic. "Jamie, it's time." The boy nodded. No fear in his eyes now, just trust. Cole carried him down, dodging sparks and smoke. The soldiers regrouped in the front room, battered, limping, bloody, but alive. Outside, the sound of rotor blades began to rise. A helicopter, unmarked but familiar in its configuration, descended through the morning mist. The intruders opened fire. Cole's property became a war zone. Dirt flew, windows shattered, smoke bloomed in clouds. But the chopper didn't stop. A rope line dropped. Margaret's voice crackled through a handheld radio. "Get them up now!" Alvarez and Parker lifted Reyes. Quan limped with help. Jamie clung to his father. One by one, they ascended, bullets whizzing past. Cole was the last to go. As he grabbed the rope, a final intruder burst through the door. He raised his weapon, but Cole had 1 shot left. He fired. The man dropped, and then he rose into the air, holding his son in one arm and the satchel in the other. Below, his home burned, but his family rose from the flames. Pectedness. When they landed on safe ground miles away, Margaret greeted them with tears in her eyes and an armored escort. "You did it," she whispered. Cole shook his head. "No, they did." As the sun finally crested the horizon, 6 broken soldiers and 1 brave father stood in the light. Not fugitives, not victims, but truth-bearers, warriors, survivors. And the war at long last was about to come into the daylight. "You're building something powerful. Ready when you are." The compound where they landed was unlike any base Cole Maddox had ever known. No flags, no salutes, no ranks barking orders. It was a quiet, gray facility buried in the hills of northern Colorado, far from eyes that watched, ears that listened, and mouths that whispered. Pectedness. After the extraction, they had flown silently through pre-dawn fog in a chopper with no tail number. Escorted by a second aircraft containing Margaret Jennings and a team of civilian watchdogs, journalists, expectedness, and 2 former senators who had turned their backs on party lines for the sake of truth. Cole, blood dried on his shirt and son asleep in his arms, had not spoken a word during the entire flight. The satchel rested under his foot, like an ancient artifact too powerful to hold. The 6 soldiers, Alvarez, Reyes, Parker, Jaff, Quan, and Rivera, sat around him in silence, bruised, bandaged, but no longer hunted. When they touched ground, they weren't welcomed with celebration. No banners, no cameras. Pectedness. Just a woman in a plain pantsuit and reading glasses who took the satchel with gloved hands and whispered, "You just changed everything." Over the next 48 hours, the compound became the epicenter of one of the most tightly controlled information storms in U.S. history. The data from the satchel, video logs, biometrics, voice recordedness, chemical inventories, proved beyond doubt that the 6 young soldiers had been deployed as live test subjects for an unapproved neurotoxic gas developed under a buried clause of the Experimental Warfare Resolution Act. The records included before and after scans, psychological breakdowns, and even voice clips from a high-ranking general who ordered their erasure, saying, "If they survive, we failed." The public didn't see the files immediately, but the right people did. Margaret knew where to take them. War crimes investigators, rogue legislators, truth-hungry journalists with nothing left to lose. The 6 soldiers, now named by their code designation, Ghost 6, were placed under protective watch, but not confinement, pectedness. Cole and Jamie were given their own room in a quiet wing of the compound, where Jamie decorated the plain walls with hand-drawn pictures of dinosaurs, helicopters, and the 6 figures who had become his heroes. Cole spent long hours in briefings, interviews, and closed-door sessions. People kept asking the same question: "Why did you help them?" And his answer was always the same: because someone had to. He didn't see himself as a savior, or a martyr, or a patriot. He saw himself as a father. A soldier who remembered what it meant to be abandoned by the system. And a man who refused to let it happen again. Outside the walls of the facility, news leaked. Anonymous sources, whistleblower channels, carefully edited snippets of footage, released one at a time like sparks to gasoline. Public outcry exploded. "What kind of country tests weapons on its own soldiers?" asked one headline. "The forgotten 6 heroes buried by bureaucracy," read another. Investigations were launched, subpoenas issued. The general who gave the kill order was placed under arrest by military police, his assets frozen, his name stripped from his command. Several officers resigned. One tried to disappear. He didn't succeed. Cole watched it all unfold on a small TV in the compound lounge. Jamie curled beside him. The boy asked, "Are they going to be okay now?" Cole looked at the screen where the faces of Alvarez and Rise appeared in an exclusive interview, nodding firmly as they told their story to a stunned reporter. "They're going to be okay," he said. "And so are we." A month passed. Then 2 Ghost 6 were granted full military clemency and honorable discharges, along with lifetime medical support and protected status. Congress introduced a new law, the Soldiers' Autonomy and Accountability Act, which required independent ethics review boards for any classified deployments and gave all military personnel the right to refuse untested biological exposure without punishment. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Cole declined every offer for fame, book deals, interviews. He had no interest in being the face of anything. All he wanted was to build again, pectedness. To give Jamie the kind of life that didn't come with rifles in the night. But it wasn't the end for the Ghost 6. With a joint donation from independent donors, private citizen coalitions, and a rare executive order, a facility was built on the outskirts of Pine Hollow. Where it all began. The Pine Hollow Recovery and Resilience Center. It was a place for veterans who didn't fit into neat boxes. For those broken by betrayal rather than battle. For those who needed more than pills and silence and Cole. He was asked to run it. At first he resisted. But then Parker, now studying trauma therapy, said something that stuck with him. "You already built a family. You just didn't know it had room for more." And so he said yes. The house Cole once lived in was rebuilt with community support, turned into a welcome home for those who needed a place to start over. Jaffe ran the fitness and physical therapy wing. Quan taught wilderness survival. Reyes ran meditation and peer counseling. Rivera managed communications and logistics. Alvarez, pectedness, whose leadership under fire had saved them all more than once, became the center's operations director. Parker returned to college to study psychology and trauma, and she sent back more hand-drawn comics, one each week, always with Jamie as the superhero. Cole woke early each morning now. not to the sounds of sirens or gunfire, but birdsong and laughter. He and Jamie planted a garden out back, and the boy named the tomatoes after each member of the Ghost Six. Life didn't become easy. It became honest. And that was enough. Sometimes, new arrivals would knock at the center's gate. Veterans, survivors, broken people with eyes that searched for something. And when they asked,
"May we?"
Cole would smile, step aside, and say yes. Always. 1 year later, the president, quietly without media, visited the center. He shook Cole's hand, met every member of Ghost Six, hugged Jamie. Then, after walking the garden and seeing a wall engraved with the names of every soldier who didn't make it home from that failed operation, he turned to Cole and asked, "Do you have any regrets?" Cole paused, looked around at the trees, the house, the kids playing soccer in the field behind the center. He thought of the moment that started it all, 6 shadows on a porch, a voice asking for help, and a single dad with nothing but his instinct and heart. "No," he said. "Not a single one." The president nodded. "Then neither do I." And as the sun set on Pine Hollow, painting the sky with orange and gold, Cole stood once more on the porch of a home he'd rebuilt, not with nails or money, but with loyalty, courage, pectedness, and the kind of love only those who've seen the darkest parts of humanity can truly understand. Because in the end, he hadn't just saved 6 soldiers. He had restored something bigger: trust, family, truth, and perhaps most importantly, hope.